You're listening to For the Fighter in You, United Fight Alliance, for the fighter in you.
Mary Ruddick is an internationally acclaimed nutritionist currently based in Europe and Africa, and now I'm learning Greece. She's co-founder of Systems That Heal, an online educational program for regulating autoimmunity and chronic disease. Co-founder of the Back to Joy Project, a GAPS diet-inspired online mental health bootcamp for regulating anxiety and depression through limbic system retraining and nutritional rebuilding of the nervous system. Creator of wellness programs for Alliance Health Insurance. She's the RAINS Method founder, which is REIGNS. We'll learn more about that. Instructor for 5 Seasons Medical in Portola Valley, California. Director of Nutrition Recipe Creator and Educational YouTube blog creator for Captain Soup. I can't wait to talk about that. Certified GAPS diet practitioner and instructor, food historian, and worldwide diet researcher. Did I leave anything out, Mary?
I have about 16 projects going in addition, but we can save those. Yes.
Wow. And before we talk about the protocols that you love and that you engage with and that you teach, can you tell us why you get into health? If I understand correctly, you had a very serious health challenge.
Yeah, very serious. Yes, it was not my intent to work in the healthcare field. I really didn't enjoy healthcare growing up or the subject of health. I was into marine biology and thought I would be a scientist, but I ended up with an infection in my brain that damaged my hypothalamus and put me bedbound and severely ill. For over 12 years, I had kidney disease, liver, almost failure, same with kidneys, and really was on my deathbed and wasn't supposed to survive. Luckily, I became the first case of this very rare condition that's now not so rare. It's known as POTS or dysautonomia, and to go into remission. And after that, I felt like, well, everyone needs to know that has this condition. And so I went back to school. And then after graduation, I started working with people to help spread the way that one might get better, and then teaching at medical conferences and presenting and doing keynotes. So as much education as I can get out there to the practitioners, because I feel that the more people that have this knowledge, the better for the patients. So that's what I've been doing now. I kind of fell into the health field, and then I kind of fell into the tribal research as well, all in truly wonderful ways.
Yeah, I think it's important for all of us to remember it's easy to kind of localize our reality, if you will, and think that we have it the worst. I know I have that tendency. I see it around me where you think, yeah, that person's hurting, but I have blah, blah, blah. And no one really gets me and no one really understands, just how hard it is for me. When we really drill down on how bad it was for you, the desperation, and I'm sure depression, although obviously I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can't imagine being bedbound for as long as you were, and for the challenges and the pain. I think it was a very painful disease as well. I really want to drill down on just the emotions that are involved, because I think that will help us all to get courage and strength in dealing with our own stuff, because I think it's pretty safe to say most of our stuff was not as intense as yours was.
No, and that's one of the benefits of having lived through it. I have to say, nothing seems significant after that. So it's thing in relation. So I feel that's one of the reasons why I feel like I was so lucky to get to go through that experience, because I have that contrast of truly how horrific life can be. And I'm sure there's other levels to that I'm perfectly happy not experiencing, but I had my own version, and it was significant enough to where anything else since then has not been relevant. It hasn't been relevant enough to kind of tip the scales. So what it felt like, honestly, a lot of the worst was aside from the physical pain, which was unrelenting and untreatable, so there was no relief from it, was the social isolation. Honestly, isolation, we humans are not meant to be introverts and to be alone, and to be forced into that and not really able to speak or communicate, not able to read books for so long and do so many of those things, but still be here in a semi-conscious state. That was truly horrific. You can't entertain yourself. You can't distract yourself. And I don't now regret it, but while I was going through it, that was harder. It got harder with each day. And luckily, at some point, I kind of popped out of it and then came to this place of presence where I was quite happy in this situation.
Mm.
And so even despite the pain and despite the isolation, the real true isolation, but you don't get there until you get there. And so if I'm speaking to someone who's going through it right now, I think my best advice would be to allow it. I think so much of the suffering comes from struggle, right? The struggle to think that we can control it, the struggle to think that we have control over whatever it is, whether it's like you can't pay the mortgage, or you got into a car accident, or you lost someone. These are all things that a lot of times the stress comes, and the depression and the horrific emotions come from the state of, I could do better, or I can change this, or resistance. And I think when we let go of resistance and we accept things for how they are, that's when things really transform.
That's powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. It's almost like the mind has to heal first in order to give your body that chance, because otherwise you're resisting what is. It's almost like conflicting software, and it's going to take up all your bandwidth, take up all your RAM, if you will. And until you just say this is what it is, until you have that, like you said, that moment of clarity. Was there, in that moment, was there a conversation that happened, an internal conversation? And if so, what was that?
Had a couple of things going around the same time, and I don't know what influenced what. Time was very fuzzy then, because every day was exactly the same for so many years. And so I don't know what happened first, but I do know that I had this sudden realization that we knew I was dying, right? My family came to say goodbye and all of those things.
Wow. It had
Yeah.
gotten to that stage. It had gotten to
Yeah,
that.
because of my organs. Yeah, my organs were going.
Wow.
So we knew that was happening. And I also was 40 pounds thinner than I am now, and I'm thin. So I really had nothing on me. So I knew that. But at the time, we were maybe 7 years into the illness or so, 7 or 8 years. And I really believed that someone would create a cure or something. And so I was constantly looking outside, and I thought I was doing enough, that I ate healthier than other people already. I'd been an athlete before, and that I was in general a happy person. So it couldn't be that. What I had was just situational. Like if you took my health away, I'd be like happy in an instant. In fact, I'd be through the moon. So I felt that I was doing all the things right, and I was taking the medications, and I was going to the best doctors. And it was in the realization that no one was coming to save me. No one was going to be as passionate about saving my life than I was. And I had to stop putting responsibility on other people to get me better. It was then that something switched, but it was truly like in the moment where pain became acceptable was in my first meditation. And I don't know why I got that lucky, but it just happened. And it wasn't some special meditation. It was just a body scan method of John Kabat-Zinn's through, I think, the Massachusetts hospital. Anyway,
He's one of the
I did
grand
one.
poobahs.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I did one, and it was like I popped into the state of joy and love for my body instead of resentment and anger.
And I think it's real powerful too when you have that revelation that no one is coming to rescue you, and no one cares as much as you do about, again, coming back to your locality. We're in these water bags, and it's local, and everybody's kind of dealing with their own stuff for the most part, right? Most of us are super narcissistic. And I'm not even necessarily saying that in a bad way. It's just localized ego. And everyone's kind of trying to keep their own head above water. And so you have to be your own advocate.
1,000%. And it's such a freeing thing. I've now learned that people can hear that phrase and take it negatively, which for me, it was very freeing to think, oh, wait a second, I have to do this, right?
Yes.
That's been the missing piece of the puzzle. I can't shop this out. This has to be done in-house. And 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 so that was extremely freeing to me, because then I wasn't waiting. And so when you take the responsibility in your own hands, the most you can do right now is be present. What's that action that you can do in this moment, right? What's that you can switch? What's the thing that you can eat in this moment instead of looking to someone else or looking towards the future for escape?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, for me, it's trying to remain vigilant and radical self-honesty,
Yes.
and know when I'm kind of hedging my bets, or I'm not 100% in, or I'm not really committed. And when you get to the stage you got to, I mean, you're like all in, right? And so, like you said, like you wouldn't give it back now because of what it gave you and what it revealed to you about yourself. To have that revelation, and I have no idea what the numbers are, but I'm guessing they're very high. The percentage of people who never make that discovery about who they really are and what they're capable of at the, at the boom, at the hardest challenge. I mean, you're down 40 pounds, you're on your bed, and people are coming to say goodbye. That's it, man. That's radical reality.
And it's a real humbling. I think whenever you go through something long term, whether it's a health issue or something else, you always think you're at rock bottom. And then there's another level. And then there's
Ooh,
another. Yeah.
ooh.
Yes. And so to get just an ultimate humbling, it's actually very, very good for us. And so there's this great old quote from one of the Eastern mysticisms talking about how the Buddha runs towards the fire instead of away, that the enlightened runs away from the fire, the enlightened runs towards it. Now, I'm not enlightened, and I can't say I would run towards a fire or go through that again. I can't imagine what anyone could offer that would make me say yes to doing it. But I am grateful that I went through it.
Yeah. Yeah. The toughness that you now know you have, which informs, I'm guessing, all of your current and future decisions, that you have that resource and you have that reservoir. It must be, and plus, like with the adventures you're doing, which we'll talk about, like you're just like the bravery, that you're accessing.
Thank you. I don't feel
It's,
brave
yeah.
at all. I also don't feel very afraid. I think, it's funny. I remember watching Gladiator before getting sick, right before it happened, right before I got sick initially, and thinking, God, how horrific that would be to be fighting like that and to get those wounds and then to potentially be alive with those wounds for 24 hours. I rewatched it. I hadn't seen it. I just watched it again recently. Completely different perspective. It was like, oh,
Ooh.
this is great. You go out, people are cheering. It's a
Ooh.
quick death. You're not in pain for a long time. Completely different perspective. So,
Whoa.
yes, unless something is
Whoa.
going to pain long term, and we're talking really long term, it's just not very scary for me. Death is nothing, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. Wow. And now you can actually live fully because you're not hedging your bets. And yeah, until you run into that fire and get in that fire and face it, you can't really live fully. You're not alive. Oh, there was a passage you I believe you had said something about something that had scared the heck out of you, and then you felt great for like 3 days because it's
Oh,
something
when
that
I got
got dumped into
I got
you.
attacked by a lion.
Yes. Yes. A
Whatever
lion attacked
hormone
you.
juice was incredible. That was not adrenaline. That was something I have never felt in my life since or before. Yes.
Wow. We're complaining about bad traffic over here in the States, and you're getting attacked by lions. Like, it's a different kind of stress, right?
No, it's true. I was thinking about it. I was listing it off the other day. I've slept with bullet ants, which are some of the worst poisons you can experience. I'm with deadly snakes all the time. I've been charged by rhinos and hippos and all sorts of things. Lions several times. I've fallen through the ice in the Arctic. Like just so many things. If you were to list it all off, it sounds like a book instead of real.
Wow. Wow. That Arctic thing too. I want to at some point talk about the cold with you, because that's one of the things. Well, let's talk about it now, but I want to, it's a good time to talk about it. I started, I like half the planet discovered Wim Hof, and the whole cold. And it sure affected me the same way it affected him. I got in the cold and I almost I think within about 5 minutes, I got emotional. And I was like, what are these emotions? And the emotions were gratitude. And it was gratitude that the cold is so reliable for me. It always is challenging. Like it's the opposite of boring, which I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that I can feel the opposite of boring. And, like that's in that it's so reliable that thank you to my body for reacting this way, that I'm not in the water board. I know it's hard to explain. It was something to do with being I felt every square inch of my body. And it started like the interpretation was pain. And then it morphed into, oh, I'm alive. I felt alive in my body. And it was emotional. It was so powerful.
It is for me too.
Wim talked about after his wife committed suicide, and then he went into depression, but he didn't have the luxury of offing himself because he had kids. And so he had no choice. He's against the wall. He wanted to kill himself, but he's against the wall because he had kids. And how the water was his respite, and the water was his church, and was his peace. I really recommend the cold water, and it becomes opposite of fear. Now I look forward to it. I can't wait. It's totally selfish. It's not bravery. It's not
No,
bravery.
exactly. Yes. It feels wonderful. And I started with cold showers way back in the day, like so we're talking 2 decades ago, because it was recommended.
Talk about early adopter.
Yes, I know. But it wasn't ice baths. It wasn't cool. I wasn't like going somewhere or anything like that. And I was in Ohio, so it was showers. But I was just down in Mexico for 4 months this year, studying with the Mayans and the Toltecs in the Mayan jungle. And in Playa del Carmen on the beach, there's this wonderful company where they do breath work and ice baths every morning. So every morning I'd be up early and I'd go do the breath work and the ice baths with them. And I had the same response. And that was of incredible gratitude, just like rippling gratitude through the whole body. Sometimes I would think of my dad. Sometimes it would be gratitude for the strength of character. It reminds you how strong you are to do something like that. It reminds you of your life force. And so you feel very grateful all of a sudden. But yes, I had the same response, and I truly miss it now that I'm in Greece. You can't get anything cold this time of year. It doesn't even, not even
really
showers.
hard in Florida too.
Yes.
I'm in Florida, and it's cold for like 32 seconds, and then it's warm no matter what setting. I'm with the faucet. I'm cranking it on the sea. I'm pushing it as hard toward the sea as I can. I'm in Florida. The pipes don't stay cold.
No, here either. And all the water is on the rooftops. And so you can only get cold showers in the winter. In the summer, it's already warm coming out of the tap.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. I can't wait I haven't been to Greece, but I've heard great things about it.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. I mean, you have to temper that because I know where you are is very beautiful as well, but it is very beautiful.
Yeah, real nice. Well, let's talk about the science, because I'm sure with people who've now heard just how bad it was and how challenging, you're on your deathbed, your family's coming to say goodbye. You're on it, man. You're all in. And you've experimented with a lot of things. Can you tell us maybe about which diet protocols or nutritional protocols you experimented with, and which one you ended up with, and why?
Sure. I would have tried anything at that time. And when it was a great distraction, it gave me a purpose, which I didn't have and hadn't had for years. And so it was really fun to try different things. And so we really did try anything we would find in the books. And so whether that was a supplement or a diet or a method of breathing or a method of moving the body, it was done. And so, and with full force, 100% of the time. So I did about 17 until I found the one that put me into remission. And during all of that time, I was building this beautiful lifestyle, morning and evening routine and daytime as well, where I'd get the light, I'd have the cold therapy, I'd be doing gratitude journals and meditations, and then blue blocking at night, getting the blue lights in the morning, all sorts of things, building things in just to see what would work, and kind of eventually getting a 4-hour 12-hour morning and evening routine. So it was like a full-time job, right? And that was still when I was bedbound. So, so I was doing all of that while trying these different dietary protocols. And I really wasn't attached to any of them. I was excited with everything I learned. And each one that I tried would kind of build on the last. And so my knowledge would get deeper and deeper. I find with nutrition and with this kind of world that I've been in now for the last couple of decades, there's the levels of knowledge, and that's why there's so much conflicting information out there, and that's how people get confused. But I actually think that's a great thing, because that means someone is on their journey. So if I see someone trying a protocol that I am pretty sure it won't work, I don't feel sad about it, because that's how I learned. Sometimes you have to learn firsthand, and so that's always fine with me. But I ended up, I initially was vegetarian before, like while I was sick. And so then I went vegan and then raw, and I did the whole thing that I think most people do. And this was, before YouTube and things. So I didn't have all the wonderful influences that we have now. There were no podcasts yet. So I was just reading books. And so I was trying some kind of outdated things. But I ended up on a Russian diet, which was a soup protocol where you make all your own soups, and it's just meat broth, meat, but the whole animal. And so you have all the cartilage and kind of fatty tissue as well when you make the broth, and then very minimal vegetables. And the diet I did was a version of the GAPS diet by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She's both an MD, neurologist, and a nutritionist, an incredibly educated woman. And she had found a similar diet called SCD when her son was dealing with autism, and I'd used a modified version of that. She kind of made it tighter, because the Russian doctors, they study the microbiome, and they did decades before our doctors. They're so far ahead with the microbiome. And so she came out of medical school with that knowledge. And so she tweaked it. And so I was doing a version of her diet. There's about 100 versions that you can do. The main thing is that you don't do starch or very specific forms of sugar that can feed bacterial overgrowth in the microbiome. And the theory was that it could rebuild at least 70% of the nervous system, which is found in the gut lining, not in the rest of the body. My condition, mostly, even though we had it in the kidneys, the liver, the lungs, the thyroid, the nerves, and in my immune system, it was primarily the underlying cause was in the hypothalamus. And I was like, well, I don't know if this will get to that, but we're going to try it. So I did that. And it actually worked. It was very counterintuitive, I will say. Had I not gone to my neurologist for nerve testing a month in, I don't know if I would have done it long enough, because I felt so horrific on it for months. But by month 12, I was in remission, and I was going back to school, and it was pretty remarkable. So really, in the string of things, for how long I was sick, that's very fast. And at least to me, it was fast. I'm sure everyone has a different perspective, but for me, it was very fast, and it was very encouraging. And just to be able to get off the breathing machine and medications was such a wild thing to go through, because a lot of what kept me motivated as I went through was thinking, we don't want to get this halfway. We don't want to be dependent on medications and on this breathing machine. How am I supposed to date with a breathing machine? So it's like not possible. That was my motivation. Yes, that was my motivation. Whenever I was like, I don't want to eat this chicken soup, I would just think of the breathing machine. I'd be like, do you want to date? If you gotta eat the chicken. So I would always bring in something to keep myself motivated, but it was very successful. And I went into remission. And then since then, I've been helping other people and studying with these tribes, which has been so much fun.
Wow. Really want to drive home how bad it was for you. You're on a breathing machine. And yeah, 4 months is nothing when you look at how many years you were down and out, and the fact that this could turn it around. You had said something earlier that is curious. To said you saw this person on this protocol, and you're pretty sure it wasn't going to get it done for this person. Is that a pretty safe bet? Do different nutritional protocols work pretty consistently across the board with different types of people, or is one person's mana another person's poison, sort of based on their own personal microbiome and their own genetics? Or can you say GAPS is going to get it done for pretty much everybody?
No, it would, but it wouldn't be the thing I would start with everyone. I would really only start it with someone who's dealing with a significant health issue, because it's one of the harder protocols to follow. It's very specific. You can't eat at restaurants. You can't have very small, minute amounts of starch. So and it can, as the bacteria die off, they release a neurotoxin. And so it really can make you quite a bit worse for months before you see any kind of light. So I wouldn't put someone through that not knowing unless they had a significant condition or they were highly motivated. You know, some people go in at diets like they do training for a marathon. So for someone like that, always it's beneficial. Yes, because we all need a healthy microbiome and a healthy nervous system and a healthy immune system. But I teach about 41 different protocols, and I do modify it not based on what someone is diagnosed, with a few exceptions, but based on where they are. And so, 3 people with eczema, I might put on very different protocols based on what I think is causing it. And like one might have a more of a nickel allergy. And so we need to look at the immune system, right? Not just elimination, but why are they reacting to something that's not poisonous? And another person would have more of a microbiome issue, and the other person has more of autoimmunity. And so, or a histamine issue. So I would look at what I think is causing it. And luckily, the beautiful thing about clinical practice is that you get thousands of cases over the years. And so you see the patterns and you can identify them. And that's something I've always been good at, is identifying patterns and solving puzzles. So I like to use that skill when I see someone. So I usually know, I don't always, I don't have a crystal ball, but I usually know what's going to work for someone and what isn't, just based on patterns and having worked with so many people. And but sometimes you get in there and it changes. And so you always have to be humble, always. And I always tell people before we start that we could likely do 3 different things before we get there. So don't put all your eggs in the basket of this protocol. Put it in the basket of, I can get better. And that keeps you.
That's a great philosophy. What works, right? Like what works. And you know what that drives home for me is the importance of getting with someone good like you, someone who's a great detective and has had thousands of cases so that they can see the pattern, because so many of us are trying to do this by ourselves, and we're going online and we're investigating all these different protocols and we're trying these different things, and it's so frustrating. I personally bumped up against that exact same thing you're talking about. When I was trying to keto adapt, my body's like, nope. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I need to keto adapt. My brain fog is becoming debilitating. I need to keto adapt. Nope. The body, like, it's a no. It's a no. I don't know how to explain it. Well, you probably, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is like the worst feeling. It feels catabolic, nausea, sweats, and I'm watching my body dissolve. And I'm like, how is this good for me? How is losing my muscle mass? How is throwing up? How is sweating? Like you're saying, all the toxins that these little buggies, it's almost like their revenge. How are you you think you're going to come and kill me?
Oh, no,
I'm going to release this.
It actually is, because those bacteria in particular, they can only eat starch and forms of sugar. So when they're not fed, they are part of us. We like to think of ourselves as separate, but we're really a universe made of all these bacteria and viruses and parasites. We're only 10% human cell, right? We're mostly these guys, and these guys transition based on our diets. And so they do control our cravings, just like if you've seen any of the nature documentaries, there's many documentaries of ants getting certain funguses and things that will go and kill the hive. Yes, we are no different than these ants. We actually have microbes that can control the way that we act. It can give us, there's ones that can give us things like schizophrenia and all sorts of things, get very violent or not violent, and also depicts what we like to eat because they want to survive. They want to have babies and they are part of us. So you really do have to die into yourself. You have to actually go through a death in order to rebirth the microbiome. And it is not pleasant, as no death is. And it'll do everything they will do everything to make you eat some starch, actually.
If any of the material on our show is helpful in any way, we are grateful. If any of it resonates with you and you're so moved, please share the show, like or subscribe to the show, or better yet, all 3. Your support allows us to continue sharing the wisdom of the world's best doctors, sports psychologists, trainers, nutritionists, coaches, lifestyle experts, and business owners. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Now, let's hit it. There was some spark in you in the darkest time when you're faced, with the prospect of your own death, and it's right there looking you in the face. And there had to have been a moment where you said, "Nuh-uh." And, like there are people who, and I think I'd make the argument, perhaps you would as well, and there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, it's my time. Like, like there's that release too, which is beautiful in and of itself. And there's that moment you came to, perhaps, do I do the release or is it nuh-uh? Can you speak to what that conversation was, the nuh-uh?
Sure. Well, let me give an idea of what it's like too, because I feel like we don't really have a conversation for chronic illness in the States, and the movies don't depict it accurately at all. When you're chronically ill, you are not going to theme parks. You can't hide that you're sick. It seems like in the movies that I see, the person is always fine, they're hiding it, and then they're dead. And so they don't have all the symptoms until like the week before they die or something. And the reality is that you have them in every moment of every day. And it's a true horror to live through. And so, to be honest, death would have been a gift at any stage. And I would have been happy to go. Years in, I mean, like way back when, I would have been happy to die. I felt like I had a great life before I got sick. It was the drudgery of the day to day, the moment to moment, the constant suffering and the constant dragging of your feet, holding on to the old life that you had before you were sick. That is the internal hell that I would say you're kind of like fighting reality. That's the part that I needed to let go of, was the fight. We think that you have to fight to survive, and it's really not a fight. It's a relaxation. In fact, I was just talking to someone in the special forces about torture and how they get trained in being tortured, and that some people aren't meant to be in these fields because they can't relax when they're being tortured. And actually, the way that the body will release the endorphins that you need to handle the pain is to relax. Well, can you imagine relaxing while someone is torturing you? It's a very difficult thing to do, and that's exactly what it's like to be sick. It's very, very difficult to put your feet up and relax and be okay with what's happening. Instead, you kind of fight and you say, this won't be my life. I'm still this person. I'm still this and that. And so you take any drug you can, you hide your symptoms as much as you can. It's not successful, but you keep kind of this attachment to your past self. And it's really in the release of that I got any relief, and I got immense relief when I released my old life. I did this exercise, which is a bit strange, but it was very helpful. And that was envisioning my full funeral, fully. Everyone who would come, what it would look like. And the gift that I got, it went on for hours in my head. I had thousands of hours in bed alone. So I could really
plenty of time to work. Yep.
Yes. And a lot of that was spent kind of doing what I think most people do. And that is thinking about your to-do list, as silly as that sounds, right? You're still attached to like, I need to get these things done. Well, when you spend enough time in bed, you start to realize that nothing ever gets done, and it's fine. It doesn't matter. But it was really in the idea of, oh, okay, what if I'm already dead? Then none of this matters, right? I don't have to fight to get these things that I wanted. Yeah, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have the house and the degrees, but it's fine. Actually, I'm seeing my death. I'm seeing how my family moves on. I'm seeing how everyone moves on. I don't have to do these things. And so it gives you this immense amount of freedom, this emotional freedom, I can't even tell you, of the lack of need for external things and this internal satisfaction, even in the worst of times. And so I would say it's more of a relaxation and a release more than anything else.
Wow. When I first heard, I was watching some of your material when you were talking about the gift that this was. And at first I'm thinking, gift? This was brutal. Like no one would wish this upon their worst enemy, and I'm like, gift, what is she talking about? And now, in that context, understanding that release and that be able to say, I don't need anything. That's what, like the Buddhists say, that's the freedom to not need.
Yes.
I don't need anything. I do not need anything. Boom. Now
Yeah,
you can be happy. Minimalist.
Yeah, you can't even help it. You just are happy because everything is great, right? So everything now that you have is a bonus. You're not thinking about what you don't have. It's the opposite. You're constantly seeing what you are. And it frees you up from the societal norms, from the timelines and all of those things, because that can be hard when you're ill, to see everyone else move on and have these life achievements and that kind of thing that you would love to do. And now you can't. So it's very helpful. And I think you can't help but see what is going right once that happens. And so it's really been a huge benefit. It's not something I would wish on an enemy or a friend, honestly, even with the gifts on the other side, because they're not guaranteed. It took me 8 years of being in that state before I popped into a state that I was happy. If it was something for a month, I don't even know if I would put someone through that. But the relief on the other side is that you're constantly satisfied. You're always happy. And if something is upsetting, it's upsetting for an hour, not days or weeks or months or years. And so that is a real, true, genuine gift to have that perspective that, when I was bedbound, I had negative money. I had no friends. I had no connections. I couldn't communicate. I had literally no possessions. I couldn't buy a book if I wanted to. And it was the happiest I've ever been. And so when you have that to contrast to, it's really hard, if not impossible, to have a bad day.
A weird little memory popped into my head while you're talking about that shaking it off. Like you get upset and you kind of shake it off now, like at the most, like within an hour or something. When I lived in Los Angeles, I had a cat, and he used to flirt with the coyotes, boy. He was risking, he wanted to be an outdoor cat, and this is the way he wanted to live. It's his life choice. All right. And so I let him be an outdoor cat. And one day he almost bought it. The coyote had a hold of him. He almost bought it. And he had sheer terror, sheer fight or flight, total amygdala, totally going at it. And then when he got free, he looked up at me like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was sort of like, that happens to me. Like I get mugged, whatever. And I'm like that. It's like for 21 days, I'm saying, why did that happen to me? This always happens to me. And how dare he attack me? And boy, I almost lost it. I'm going to go kill him, or now I'm going to cry for about 3 weeks. My cat, literally, once the danger was gone, he looked over at me like, "Hey, what's up? You get some food for me?" Just
That's exactly how it is, actually. And even one of my friends caught it on camera when I was up in Greenland in the Arctic. The sled dogs are vicious. They're not raised like pets. And some of them had gotten into a massive fight and then had jumped at me while I was on video. Unintentionally, I was just in the wrong spot at the wrong time, but their mouths went right towards my face and they got maybe this close. I was startled, and then I just started laughing immediately after. So it's true. It's very much being like that cat response of, in the moment that you're in it, yeah, you still feel it, but there's no hangover.
Yeah, there's no ruminating. There's no conversation about what it is. There's no trying to figure it out. There's no trying to argue with it, resist it. It's an isness. It's an isness. Dog almost bit my face off. That's an is.
Yes. There was I was talking to someone earlier this week, and they were talking about how before bed they think about a lot of things. And I had this memory of when I was in high school and I would have all these thoughts before bed. I can't even remember the last time I had thoughts before bed. It's just a blank slate when I go to sleep.
Boom.
Just
flip off
always.
The light switch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that too. I've been gifted that. And it's, you can see why the Buddha is laughing, because the revelation of this, it's like, oh, the whole thing's a party.
Yeah.
The whole thing is school. It's just to be experienced.
It is for you. Even the really tough stuff, it is for you. Like you can learn from it. You can take something for it. Yeah, definitely.
Einstein said the whole thing's friendly.
Yes.
Einstein said the whole thing's friendly.
And when you look at the world that way, you can really look at the world that way. It does become a very different world. It's not that there aren't bad people. There are people that will scam. It's that getting scammed isn't that bad. You can learn from that, and you can build your character based on what happened and all this.
Suffering's optional.
Yes.
The shit's not optional.
Yes.
The shit.
That's exactly. Yes. Yes, it is there. Yes. And you just got my first cuss on camera.
Got your first. Oh, really? I didn't catch it. You may have been blessed with a drop off. I think it dropped off. I think you're good. If not, I'm gonna edit it and I'm gonna do it like a rap. Like the word's gonna go like that over and over and over again. And the title of this one is gonna be Mary Loses It, or Mary, do like with all the exclamation points, Mary Ruddick is mad at da 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 da. And you see it like this, and then the swear is going da 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 da. So let's talk a little bit more about the science so people can really start applying this. And it's important to remember, and this for me, I own this. I have not successfully keto adapted. I get it that it's really going to help my brain fog. I have egotistical issues around it. A lot of it is the weight loss. I don't want to lose the weight. The diarrhea freaks me out. The bile and just the dehydration, all of it to me is like anti-life. So it is counterintuitive, because to me, life is muscle, life is cardio, life is good skin, and it's all opposite when you do this initially. And, I just like my body's like carb, slow starch. The reason I know what you're saying is accurate is because that very thing you said about the buggies and about the gaps, knowing that you got to get rid of the slow starch, is that's exactly what I crave when I do this. By day 3, it's like, I will eat potatoes out of my way. You know what I mean? I'm going to eat carbs, and it feels good temporarily. Those buggies feeling like they get their food, they'll let you have a little bit of, we're going to give you a little bit of distance now. You gave us what we wanted. You're going to feel good for a while. You feel anabolic, you feel strong, you feel thick, you put on some good weight. And this, goes for the hard gainers. If you're an ectomorph and that's very much me. Psychological, isn't it? You got to get past that barrier of the detox.
Very much so. Yeah, you really do. It's counterintuitive, and it's not always appropriate for everyone, even though traditionally all humans could do it. But if someone has a lot of histamines going on, it may not be appropriate at the time. There are times where it's not appropriate now in a modern body, but traditionally it's always a good thing. It is counterintuitive, though, for many people, and many people are so metabolically damaged. Humans really were not designed to be only burning glucose year round. I don't go to a single place around the globe. I study with all these indigenous tribes, and nowhere are they just glucose burning around the year. They'll have a season or 3 seasons a year where they're in ketosis, or like the Mongolians year round, right? Or many regions like the Arctic year round. And so we didn't have that growing up. We grew up on cereals and all sorts of carbohydrates. And so most of us have never adapted before, and we're very metabolically damaged. If you look at the top killers, especially in America, they're mostly metabolically driven, from heart disease to diabetes, right? Then you get the kidney disease from that. So we have, and you could list cancer there too, right? Cancer eats glucose and glutamate. So, and probably other things that we don't know about. But because of that, it can take us longer, and also it can make us suffer. When we're very metabolically healthy, meaning that we handle blood sugar well, a very, very healthy human can flip in and out of ketosis, no problem. But typically the people that are going to do try something like the ketogenic diet are doing it for a health reason, right? I do have a ton of professional athletes on my docket, and I know a lot of nutritionists do, and doctors as well, who do that ketogenic diet year round, and it's much easier for them, right? But for someone with a health issue, it's a bit different. It can take a lot longer. So if I'm working with someone, say with MS, it can take them 6 months sometimes to get into ketosis, even when they're doing the appropriate macros. For other people, it's 3 days. But that is different than the adaptation, as you know, right? Getting into ketosis is different than the body adapting and starting to use fat for energy, which in a healthy individual would be 3 to 6 weeks, but it can be much longer if you're metabolically damaged.
And can you get to a stage where you can eventually put that weight back on, even staying is a mostly like paleo keto type of protocol. Is it, I haven't gotten to that where you can put the muscle back on it. It feels like I'm not as explosive in the gym without the glycogen in my tissue. Huh?
Oh, well, two things. So I just released today an interview with Tim Noakes, who's an exercise doctor in South Africa. And he talks about, he's done over 700 studies, double-blind studies. I mean, the man is just incredible with his production of research books and studies. But he has studied that a lot and has found, I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn on. Let me get
Nothing's
that.
coming through on mine. Nothing's doing it. Are you,
Oh,
it's
no?
interrupting you?
Oh, no, if it's not coming through on your end, that's fine. I can
Clean
I
screen.
can roll with it. That's so good to know. Okay, good.
Yeah, clean screen.
Sorry, I wish I knew how to turn
That would
off.
only come through on me, I believe, if you share your screen.
Okay.
So that's personal to, it's personal to you, those notifications, because you're the administrator. This is my understanding.
Okay, great. I'm so glad to know. I didn't know. I thought this had been disrupting my clients all the time, because anyone who has my Zoom link can jump on. Okay, so Tim Noakes has been studying
I've heard of
the
him, by the way. Yeah, sorry.
incredible. So he's studied this primarily, especially with marathon runners. And actually the studies say the opposite. But what you're experiencing is true. The body needs a source of energy. Now that can either be your protein, your, sorry, it wouldn't be protein. It can either be your glucose or your fat. Those are your two sources of energy. So if you're in that in-between stage where you're not eating carbohydrates, but you're also not fat adapted, you have no energy. And this is why I think a lot of people do carnivore incorrectly, because they don't actually go into ketosis. And I know we haven't talked about carnivore, but it's become a big thing. And so if someone doesn't get better on it, a lot of times they're not in true ketosis. It doesn't matter that they're not eating any carbohydrates. They're eating too much protein. And so it will very easily keep them out. I've never had someone who had a very serious condition that I absolutely had to get into ketosis, not be able to get there if I lower the protein enough. But it's not a good idea, right? To go very low. Like a few doctors right now are really pushing under 10% of your calories from protein. And that gets to more dangerous zones, like 40 grams a day. That's not enough. But on a true ketogenic diet, you don't muscle waste. That's why we have so many athletes on it. You have the opposite. If you think about the Inuits, right, before the Western diet came, they're rounded, they're full, they're stocky. All of the tribes that I go that do either carnivore or ketosis, they're the strongest of the region. They're the biggest, they're the most muscular of the region. It's the other ones, the plant eaters actually, that are more wiry, and the hunter gatherers, but they need to be small. You want a small body if you're a long distance runner. And that's actually an advantage when you're a hunter. So you want to be short and a bit wiry. But otherwise, if they're more, say, agricultural, like raising cattle, no, they can be in ketosis and they're very muscular. So my weight stays the same. I don't know if you noticed, but it's always the same. And I actually gained a ton of weight on ketosis. I got a little fat, actually. So you can definitely gain weight or lose weight on it. But what you really want to focus on is your microbiome and getting that balance, because your weight is really a result of your microbiome. I can have someone eating 400 calories a day and gaining weight, actually, and someone eating 3,000 and losing weight. So for instance, I have a supermodel as one of my clients right now, and she had gotten too thin with a condition, and we've put on 20 pounds, right, using ketosis. So you can absolutely gain weight on a ketogenic diet. What it comes down to is your ability to absorb, and that's your bacteria.
That really is good news for me, that you were able to put 20 pounds on her while she was in keto. Wow.
Yeah, I gained 40 pounds on keto. I see it all the time. So
Wow.
if someone needs to put on muscle or needs to put on fat, whatever it is, it's not that hard. You have to go through an adjustment phase. I'm pretty sure everyone will lose weight in the first week because you lose water weight. You're going to lose at least 4 pounds of water, depending on your height, because carbohydrates take 4 times as much water to process through the body than fat and protein do. So when you stop eating so many carbohydrates, you drop a lot of water and inflammation.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
So that kind of
Be like crazy when you get off the carbs.
Absolutely. Yes.
I
But
like
then
peed like 16 times in the day. I'm like, how is this happening? How is
yes,
this? It's
yes,
amazing.
it is. It really is. And the nausea passes. I see the nausea mostly in the children. So if I have someone with epilepsy and we need to use the diet with a child, something like that, you'll see vomiting in the first 3 days. But after that, you shouldn't have nausea. So if there is nausea, then something else is going on, an electrolyte imbalance, or the sympathetic nervous system is active rather than the parasympathetic. And so a lot of parasympathetic breathing and using things like cold therapy and light therapy at the right times will regulate it. But typically by week 4 to 6, even if someone has a nausea causing condition, like a dysautonomia, something like that, it should be regulated. Now, if it's coming from a bile issue, like you mentioned, so not breaking down in fats, for that, you go more slowly into the diet if you have time. And so you adjust your fat up slowly, the body will learn. So the liver and the gallbladder both can break down fat, but it has to be trained to do so. If you've eaten a low fat or moderate fat diet your whole life, and then you suddenly go on a high fat diet, the body's going to flip out. Right? So it doesn't know what to do. It's very confused by it, actually. That's why you get a lot of the symptoms. It's very confused. And so if you slowly bring in the fats, maybe you increase your fat by a teaspoon each week. That's it, just an extra teaspoon every day. And then soon you're up to a tablespoon, and then you can increase by a tablespoon, right, each week. If you go in slowly and you watch your stools and you watch your stomach as you do so, then once you get enough fat in your diet, then you can do the switch into ketosis and you don't have those bile issues, right? The other option is to have what I call soluble fiber vegetables. These are very different than the fiber that's used in cereals and in bread. Soluble fiber is really very different. And I so wish it had a different technical name. Really, I like to call it a nutrient instead because it's very different. But it binds to the bile and to the fat soluble toxins and helps to remove them from the body. So you can use those as well. And that's things like artichokes and carrots and onions and garlic if you tolerate them, and inulin in chicory. If you ever go to New Orleans, they put chicory in the coffee. So that's actually a really great tool. I love that one. Chicory can be used as well.
You know, you triggered a thought, Mary, in that, and maybe help us reconcile. A lot of the nutritionists or experts are saying, you know, to make sure you have a wide variety of vegetables. And that's because you want to have as much a diverse profile of microbiota as possible. And it strengthens the good guys and the overall environment, I guess. But that would seem to fly in the face of get off the vegetables and go much more for, you know, organ meats and, you know, the sort of non-fiber.
Yes.
How are those two worlds living at the same time?
Levels of education is what it is, really. So it's an assumption. And unfortunately, a lot of medicine is based off assumptions. What happened when US scientists and doctors started studying the microbiome is that it was too diverse for them to study it properly. We have to remember what a study actually is. A study is changing one factor. You can't change trillions of factors at once. And unfortunately, with the microbiome, you can't isolate. And so we've gotten a lot of false assumptions from looking at it from a Western point of view. Now, the Russians don't fall for this as easily, thank goodness, partially because they've been studying the microbiome for so long. But in the real definition of the term, you can only change one factor. Now, because it was so diverse, the scientists were like, we can't, this is impossible. Actually, this is actually impossible. And so what they started doing is looking at waste systems of cities, and they would compare healthier cities with more unhealthy cities. So let's say pick somewhere in Mississippi, typically, sorry, Mississippi, I love your state, but your health isn't great. So they would pick, say, a city there, or Alabama. And then they would take another city, say Boulder, Colorado, that has healthier people, right? Healthier overall picture of the health. And they studied the sewer systems and correlated bacteria to whether or not this meant you were healthy. Well, in the States, we are constantly told we need to eat more vegetables, more fiber, all these things, right? Low fat. So when you do that, you're going to have a different kind of bacteria. They're going to eat different food. Each bacteria eats a different kind of food. And so because of that, your bacteria are solely based on what you're eating. and where you are. And so if you're eating a diverse diet, then you're going to have a huge diversity of bacteria. But you have to take in all factors when you look at people's health. And anyone who is quote unquote eating according to the guidelines are also going to be exercising according to the guidelines, not drinking, not smoking, right? Not, not reckless driving, not doing all these other things like staying up all night that tend to correlate with poor health. And so you get a skewed view, unfortunately. Luckily, with my work, I get to go to all these regions and see people's microbiomes and see what they're eating. And it's part of why I'm doing it, because I can see someone on the carnivore diet, a carnivore tribe, in perfect health. And I can see a tribe that eats a mixed diet of, say, fish or vegetables and meat, and perfect health. And the people that eat more foods are going to have a diverse microbiome. The people that eat limited are not going to have diversity, but they're in perfect health. So it's not the diversity that gives us health. It's what bacteria are there that gives us health. And so that's far more important. You know, people could always eat starch and be healthy before. It's not that starch is bad. There's many traditional societies that eat starch. It's that now we have very damaged microbiomes, and those damaged microbiomes have overgrowths, and those overgrowths eat the starch. And so if you eliminate those starches temporarily, put them on a traditional diet without starch, then the microbiome rebalances, the person can get healthy. But it's very different than what we're taught about food. I mean, once you start to look into the microbiome, you get humbled, and also everything you've learned gets turned on its head, because the idea of eating the rainbow is truly not well studied. It's the opposite. In fact, you're going to be eating a lot of plant toxins. You're going to be eating a lot of lectins, a lot of oxalates, and many people, like myself included, can cause a lot of damage to their kidneys and their livers and their immune system by eating all of these plants that are not processed in traditional ways. You know, we had, in the early 1900s, we had a real issue with pellagra, and also with a few other deficiency disorders. And it was because we weren't processing the vegetables correctly. So you can get extreme deficiency disorders from not processing something in the traditional way. And unfortunately, we are not processing anything in the traditional way anymore. So we think tomatoes are healthy. We think corn is really healthy to eat on the cob, which actually on the cob and as popcorn is the worst way you could possibly eat it. It causes a massive niacin deficiency. With niacin deficiency, you're going to get nerve damage, you're going to get addictions, actually, and potentially schizophrenia. And so you get horrific conditions from these deficiencies. Whereas if the corn is processed through a 5-step process, the traditional way, processed with lime, soaked, sprouted, it releases the enzyme. And now you can access the niacin in the corn, and it's perfectly healthy to consume. So the processing is very important, but no one is at home in the kitchen with this knowledge anymore. And because of that, we're having a lot of problems.
Fascinating. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it really has to do with uptake. It really has to do with the ability to absorb and the ability to handle or not handle the protective mechanisms that the plants inherently have, because they don't want to get eaten anymore. You or I want to get eaten. And so they have their plant defenses. And so, you know, the sprouting and the fermenting and all of the different ways to release the magic. Is that, am I hearing you correctly?
Yes. Well, yes and no. There's many foods that really weren't meant for human consumption, or if they were, they have to go through months of processing. Like the potato, we think if you eat, I used to eat baked potatoes almost every day of high school. I thought I was being so healthy. I'd eat it with salt, no butter, no sour cream. Yes. And the butter and sour cream were the healthy part. The potato was the problem. Potatoes in Peru get processed for months. And then when they go to eat it, they dip it in soil between every bite, and that neutralizes the solanines, which if you want to talk about a real plant toxin, solanine is serious because it's fat soluble. So it stays in your body causing damage for 60 to 90 days. And so people don't realize, they think they're eating healthier when they're consuming all these things, and that people have always eaten potatoes. But that potato they eat in Peru needs a different name than the potato we eat in the States because it's not processed the same. And so you end up with all these plant toxins and this lack of availability of the body to access the nutrients within the plant. And so we think that colorful fruits and vegetables are nutrient dense, when the most nutrient dense foods are actually fat vitamins rather. So your ADK, which is found in animal products and in organ meats. Organ meats have some of the highest concentrations of the vitamins and the minerals. So we're really not well educated on food, I would say, and actually even some of the highest degrees in the nutritional world are very poorly educated on food as well. We still teach the caloric method, which we've known for a long time is not the case. For calories to work as a method, you have to have a closed loop system. So for my engineers out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But just for those who aren't engineers, think of a car. A car will function on gasoline because it's the closed loop system. We are not a closed loop system, but we're using a calorie system like a car would use gasoline. Unfortunately, though, we don't eat our own food. Our bacteria does. We eat their byproducts. And so whatever they turn that food into is what we end up with. Now, our bacteria can do pretty incredible things. They can produce our B vitamins for us and do all sorts of things if we have the right people in there, the right little bacteria in there. But they can also increase or decrease the way that that food is absorbed. And so what the clinicians are really seeing a lot of right now is very overweight people that are nutrient deficient. It's called high caloric malnutrition, and it's widespread, very widespread.
It's just amazing that you could be that big and still be malnourished. You know what, it popped into my head, and tell me if this is accurate. When you were mentioning how the vitamins are very concentrated in the animal's organs, the animals are almost doing the filtering for us, aren't they? Where they're eating the vegetables and they're cleaning them all up, getting rid of the oxalates and the phytates and the solanine, if I said that correctly.
Yeah, you
all
did.
of these. Not bad for an old man. And they're kind of filtering all of this out for us, right? And they're giving us the clean version when we eat it.
Usually, yes. Traditionally, yes. However, since humans started feeding the animals foods that are not natural for them, they are also having these issues. So I actually work with a lot of horses, honestly. I work with a lot of thoroughbred horses. Anyone in the horse industry, you guys know what those horses cost, right? So if you get an autoimmune condition in one of those horses, you want to fix it. And the diets are really poorly given. I mean, they're giving peppermint patties to these, multi-million-dollar horses daily, constantly. They're encouraging people to give them peppermint patties as treats. So we have this widespread. And so if, for instance, a cow is designed to work on a ketogenic system, in fact, many grazers are, horses, gorillas, they're all in ketosis. Their bacteria turn their carbohydrates into butyric acid, which is a fatty acid. And so that's how they work on that system. They don't have a choice like we do. We can use either energetic system. We're quite unique in that way. But if they're fed the wrong food, if you take a cow and you feed it corn, it can't break those lectins down. So the lectins will go into the fat and the toxin remains. Now, if it's natural to its diet, then yes, it neutralizes the toxin, but nature designed that perfectly. So the animal knows what to eat, what not to eat. However, when it's in a pen, it doesn't have the choice, then you can get into trouble. So the farm-raised salmon that's eating the soy and the corn, it's gonna have those phytonutrients in the end product, primarily in the fat, not in the protein.
Mary, a lot of the people who are advocates for the vegetarian diet point to the blue zones as one of their proof of concept, I guess, that the vegetarian protocol is the most effective and the safest and has the longest lived people as proof of that. But you've gone on to talk at length about that as such a robust traveler who have been to the blue zones. Why is that argument not sound?
Oh, because it's not true. It's just not true. Unfortunately, the blue zones was created by a man, I think, who had perfectly good intent, but he was not, he worked as in journalism. He's not in the nutrition or health field. He doesn't know what he's looking at, to be honest. And if you look at a plate, you can't really see what it is. So for instance, in Costa Rica, when I was in that blue zone, I went to the farm. They eat a lot of meat and a lot of fats. They cook everything in lard, They're raising pigs for the lard. They have bucket upon bucket of the lard. The lard is their primary caloric intake. So if you break down their plate by calorie percentage, they're actually eating more animal products than plants. But because they have the corn and the beans there on the side of the meat, it looks like they have a larger portion of vegetable, but it's not. You have to factor in the fat that's used. In the blue zone of Greece, where I live, I spent a lot of time there. And honestly, it's not any different than most of the traditional Greek villages. The Greeks tend to eat a lot of different foods, but they don't import, and they know how to process things appropriately. And they use fat, and they eat the whole animal. It was hog season. They had all just hunted. So there was tons of liver as an appetizer. You eat a block of cheese for each person as an appetizer. And all of any kind of vegetables cooked in enormous amounts of animal fat. And then you've got your olive oil and everything else. So it's not plant-based by any means. I expected it to be honest, because I do see varied diets, and I'm not a proponent of just one. I think we can be healthy on a lot of different ones, but getting your health back is different than just being healthy and continuing to be healthy. But I did expect to see far more plants than I did when I was in that blue zone. And then I go to other regions that don't eat any, and they're by far the healthiest that I've seen. So do I personally eat plants? I love broccoli. I just bought a ton. I healed while eating minimal plants, and I've been mostly in ketosis for 15 years. I go out sometimes, like I'm about to go to Italy. I'll probably enjoy some things. I've been healthy now, I can. But it's if I got sick again, I would definitely scale it back, and I would potentially cut them out, potentially, if I needed to. A lot of people do.
Does the protocol address kind of the big four killers? If you look at diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and perhaps any of the dementias, Alzheimer's, certainly, does it address all four? I mean, it seems to be, I don't want to use the word panacea, but it does seem to really be across the board favorable and across the board effective. Is that the case?
For those, yes, absolutely. Yeah, with say diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's, you're dealing with Alzheimer's is really diabetes type 3, right? It's an insulin resistance in the brain is what you're dealing with. And so if you don't get your metabolic health in order, you can't get healthy. With cancer, metabolic, again, it consumes the glucose, right? It can't grow. You can't get more cancerous cells unless you have an abundance of glucose in your blood. So you have to limit your glucose with that. It's imperative. And obviously that's the case with diabetes, right? That's the one that they don't fight us on. So you have that situation in all three of those. It's really quite important to have a healthy response to sugar. Now, or carbohydrates. Now, traditionally, people would. So, my family has French lineage, and my family eats carbs, and they're not overweight, and they don't have diabetes, they don't have Alzheimer's. We're not dealing with any of those things. We have the right bacteria for that in our family, right? You have to have the bacteria to have the metabolic health. And so what you'll see is with an indigenous culture, if they're not used to the high carbohydrate diet, as many are not, as soon as they're put on it, as soon as Western foods come in, they explode. They get huge, right? Look at the Polynesians. They're massive people. They weren't. When they were discovered, they weren't massive. They weren't overweight. They didn't have all these health issues. They didn't have any health issues. So when they were just eating their fish and their coconuts and their seaweed, they were in perfect health. And that's well documented. And now they are some of the most sick, right? So when you go to regions where you see a lot of obesity, or with, like, say, an immigrant population, it's because they don't have the bacteria. And so they're having a higher spike to the same food. You and I can eat the exact same food and have a very different glucose spike and a very different metabolic pattern to it. And so that's a huge piece of the picture. And then, of course, it matters your timing as to when you eat. A lot of cultures will either do no breakfast or very light, and they might have a carb with it. So like in France, they might have a croissant with butter and a coffee, all right? Croissant is 50% fat. It's 3-day fermented by law, so the lectin is out. There's no gluten in there. The gluten is the lectin, so are all the allergens, the top. And then your coffee, it's actually not a lot of carbs. It's like 10 to 20 carbs at most. And then you have a lot of butter and you have your coffee, so you're fine. especially for a population that's used to it. Now, is that like the most ideal thing? No, but it's fine. They might have an egg, right? They love their poached eggs. So, so there's that, but we tend to eat a lot of carbs at breakfast. And in America, we average about 300 grams of carbs a day, which is massive. I haven't seen a single traditional culture that eats over 100 grams. So when I have people that don't do a ketogenic diet, when I'm teaching someone one of the other protocols, that would be about 100 grams of carbs at most, 70 to 100. Very different, and it's going to look low carb, but it's not. It's enough to give you enough glucose for energy without going into the disease states that we're seeing today. So if you start with a low carb breakfast, that's going to help your blood sugar for the whole day, whether you're in ketosis or not. So really, for the health of our country, it would benefit if people would get off the cereal and eat a low carb breakfast. Even if they're going to eat the same amount of carbs later in the day, they'll have a different inflammatory cycle.
I had a business idea, and that would be keto houses all throughout the states, where you go and they would have a Mary Ruddick running it and you'd be with other people for fellowship. Yeah. Because the adaptation is the hard part. And that's there's no sugar, no pun intended, no sugar coating it. There's no sugar coating it. It's nasty adapting.
Well, one, it's not hard for everyone, but it is hard for a lot of people. It was hard for me too. So just know it's not abnormal. And two, you can do it a fun way. So if I have the time with someone and if they're healthy enough, then I'll do it with like keto snacks and things. I'll replace all their favorite foods. We'll do ketogenic pizza, ketogenic ice cream, we'll make cheesecakes, so we make it fun and tasty so that they have something to look forward to. We'll do that first. And then if we need to go in a more in-depth protocol, like the soup protocols and those kind of things, then we do that next is what we'll do. And that way they're already adjusted. They're not doing both at once. That can be very helpful if it's been brutal for you before.
It's very helpful in reframing it and making it fun and having a blast with it. Let's really just go back to the heart part of it, because I think for a lot of people psychologically, it's hard to purposely eat fat, especially animal fat, because we've been so indoctrinated and so brainwashed that it's dangerous for heart disease. So even if your LDL goes up, tell me if this is right, even if your LDL goes up when you initially adapt, as long as the HDL goes up commensurately, then you're okay. Is that accurate to say? Because the LDL might go up when you do this.
Okay, I will speak from a personal stance so I don't get into legal trouble here.
Yeah, by the way, none of this is meant to be medical advice.
Yes, medical advice.
Consult with your medical
not.
practitioner if you have any questions. And I put a disclaimer at the end of the show too in post.
Perfect.
Yep.
So for me, what I would want in my body is high levels of cholesterol. I wouldn't care if it's HDL, LDL. With a number of conditions like type 1 diabetes, they do not reverse unless the LDL is high. And if it's low, the person is going to get worse. So this idea of good and bad and all of that is silly. Cholesterol is a nutritional thing. And it's studied by people who do not understand it well, to be frank. And it's our healing hormone of the body. If I tell you that it's the healing hormone of the body, would you want to lower that? No, you want that to regenerate your tissue and you need it. So what most people, when they're chronically ill, especially with autoimmunity, not with heart disease, but with autoimmunity, you'll see very low cholesterol. And every time they get their blood work done, that's what they get told. This is great. Your cholesterol is so low. And they're like, yeah, but I'm dying. Right? That's what I got told every single time. And I was like, great.
Yeah, right.
What I would not want to see is high triglycerides. Triglycerides are an indication of chronic inflammation. There's two forms of inflammation, chronic and emergent, right? So you have the immediate. You always want immediate inflammation. That's your immune system. That's if you get an infection. That's if you get a cut. You need that. Chronic inflammation you never want. All disease is associated with chronic inflammation. So triglycerides are a marker of chronic inflammation. So if you have chronic inflammation, you have high triglycerides and you have high cholesterol, it's telling me that your body is producing the healing hormone to get at the issue and it's not successful. It's not able to regenerate the tissue. So we're in a serious disease state. If your body has a lot of healing hormone and it has no chronic inflammation, so your triglycerides come down, that's exactly what we want to get into remission. So I always look at that is what I go for. Now, that said, it is normal for all forms of tests to go off in the first 6 weeks to 3 months, because you're ridding your body of a lot. So it's normal for your liver enzymes to go up, especially if you've lost weight suddenly, which most people will do on this diet. They'll lose weight, right? And if you lose weight, your liver enzymes go up, your triglycerides go up. The next month they're down. So you just have to give it one more month and then test again, and not be too concerned.
Boy, this is fascinating, and it's kind of shocking to me that we know that this information is there, and yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again in the West. That's killing us, because those are the big four that when you look at cancer and Alzheimer's and heart disease and diabetes, those are probably, between those four, that's going to take out 80 or 90% of us. And to know that this nutritional protocol addresses all four of them, and the science is there. What is it what's the hang up? Why isn't this getting out to the critical mass? Why aren't we hearing about this? And why isn't it being implemented by our healthcare practitioners?
One, they don't study diet, and a lot of times they're not legally allowed to give advice. But here in Florida, the rules are so rigid as to who can give nutritional advice and who can't. We talked about Tim Noakes earlier. He was in a 10-year legal battle for giving someone advice on Facebook. This is a man with multiple degrees and 700 studies. 10 years down the drain, hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal cases. So it's very, very much regulated. And I don't think there's some conspiracy. I think there's human error. There's a lot of human error. We tend to think that we know things that we don't. And unless we get really humbled and realize that, what we've been taught doesn't work, we don't know, to be frank. So, and in my opinion, what I started doing when I kind of had that change in my illness to the more positive, I started to only see practitioners who had healed from something extremely difficult. And if they weren't in perfect health, I stopped seeing them. Wow. Because as a practitioner, if you're not in good health, then you don't know what you're teaching. And if you have health conditions, you have no business giving people advice.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Tell us an average day for you when you get up. What do you actually eat? What would you consume in an average day? Your morning, lunch, and dinner?
I eat differently based on where I am. So I'm in Greece right now. I get up and I do my morning routine. So I go out in the sunshine. I get light in my eyes. I do a meditation and a gratitude journal and a workout. I like to get a cold shower, but right now I can't. So, so then
not in Greece.
Yeah, no, I don't eat until later in the day. So I'll eat around 2, and then again around like 7. I'll have a proper meal in the evening. But mostly meats here, a lot of lamb, chicken, a lot of fish. I do eat more vegetables here than in many places, although it kind of rivals maybe Latin America. But so I'll have, like today I have broccoli for my dinner. I'll sometimes do some beets, lots of onions, things like that. But I'll tell you something that happens is that the longer that the healthier that you get, and the longer that you have been balancing your microbiome, you don't really have cravings. So I don't really think about food, to be honest. Like I don't really get hungry. I eat more out of duty. And then once I start eating, I really enjoy it. The second I have a bite of food, I'm like, oh, amazing. And I dig in. But you're not kind of the slave to food that you can be otherwise. So you kind of see food differently. You see it more like art, because you don't have these cravings coming from your bacterial overgrowth. And so it's just like very easy. I'll usually have yogurt before I go to bed, and maybe I'll put some berries on it if it's the appropriate season. But I eat very seasonally and very regionally. And so whatever is like a traditional food in that area, that's what I'm going to consume.
Do you have to pay attention to calories and your macros just to keep your weight on, or does it kind of self-regulate and all take care of itself?
No, fully self-regulates. Yeah, so no, I don't count calories. I don't look at my macros anymore. I can actually eat a lot of carbs and be in deep ketosis. I can eat about 70 grams a day and stay in deep ketosis. So the better your metabolic health, the more carbohydrates you can consume, and also the more protein. So I was just talking with a doctor about this who had also studied with hunter-gatherers, and I was really surprised that the Hadza on my first trip were in ketosis because they were eating pretty lean protein, and that was primarily what they were eating. They were eating a lot of baboon, which is pretty lean aside from the brain, which they love, but that's not a lot of food. So, but they were in ketosis, which really surprised me. And I think it's because their metabolic health was so good that they could eat more protein and not have those troubles that we tend to have.
Wow. Yeah, that's important for people to remember. Protein will kick you out of ketosis. And that's that, again, coming back to the psychology of it for those of us who are trying not to lose weight. It's very tempting when you're eating all that fat to just kind of start upping that protein, because you do see the weight loss initially. And I know for a lot of people, the weight loss part is great. Like that's a great benefit. But for the ectomorphs out there who are hard gainers, it's tempting not to up that protein. All right. Heather from Columbus, Indiana has a 3-part question, if you can take it. She's wondering how long it takes to transition over to ketosis. And then also, if you would, this is more of maybe a little bit of a psychological question, how to convince others that not eliminating every day is just fine, and how much water should she take in a day?
Okay, those are all good questions. You should transition into ketosis within 3 days, but ketogenic adaptation is different. And ketosis can take up to 6 months. So if it's taking you longer, don't feel like you have to change your macros or that you're not doing anything right, as long as you're really modifying them. I mean, measure, make sure. But as long as your carbs are under, say, 15 to 20, your protein is 60, between 55 and 60, and your fat is unlimited. If you're not in ketosis, just give it time. That doesn't mean you have to adjust any further. That just means time, right? There's metabolic damage, no big deal. If you could go through those questions again.
Yeah, sure. And just a quick follow-up on that one. You said getting into ketosis and adapting are 2 different things. Can you tease out what the difference is?
Yes. So the body can get into ketosis immediately for some people. They're very lucky. Or they've been doing it for a long time, like myself. But adaptation is when your body actually looks to fat immediately. It's not looking for carbohydrates anymore. So it's in a different energy system. So it's fully switched out of the glucose system and has switched to the ketosis system. And that tends to take about 6 weeks for most people today. During the transition, a lot of the reason that you have so many of those symptoms of fatigue and all of those kinds of things is because you're not on an energy system. You're not getting the glucose and you're not fat adapted yet. So your body, every time you eat, is looking at, okay, are there carbs? Where are the carbs? No carbs? Okay, we'll use fat. And so it's a high energy process to do that. And after 6 weeks or so, the body stops looking for carbs and it goes immediately to fat.
We're speaking with Mary Ruddick, who is an internationally acclaimed nutritionist, currently based in Europe and Africa and Greece. She's co-founder of Systems That Heal, an online educational program for regulating autoimmunity and chronic disease. She's co-founder of the Back to Joy Project. We need to talk about that. A GAPS diet-inspired online mental health bootcamp for regulating anxiety and depression through limbic system retraining and nutritional rebuilding of the nervous system. Oh, wow. Woo. Creator of wellness programs for Alliance Health Insurance. She's the RAINS Method founder, instructor for 5 Seasons Medical in Portola Valley, California, director of nutrition, recipe creator, and educational YouTube vlog creator for Captain Soup. She's also a certified GAPS diet practitioner and instructor, a food historian, and worldwide diet researcher. I want to visit those, but just to follow up with Heather in Columbus, Indiana, how to convince others that it's not necessarily unhealthy to not eliminate every single day. And I don't know that that is healthy, not to eliminate every day.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with that.
Okay.
It would be normal whenever you're going through a protocol to have irregular stools. And so I see very few people that have healthy looking stools while they're trying to heal. The the colon is a detox organ, and it's what moves the bacteria out. So you can get diarrhea, you can have severe constipation, you can have a hot mess down there the whole time, right? And a lot of times that is the last thing that regulates. So I would never look at that as a sign of something working. But but same with the skin. Actually, the skin can get much worse before it gets better. But we do need to eliminate, ideally, every day. And whether or not we eat fiber has nothing to do with it. We have bacteria that live in our colon that if the stool sits there for 48 hours, it releases a toxin, a neurotoxin that inhibits something called the migratory motor complex, which is the nervous system of the gut lining. And when it does that, it causes chronic constipation. So the more constipated you are, the more constipated you get. So I like to keep stools moving. Every 2 days is the longest I'll allow someone to go. Outside of that, we increase magnesium, you do enemas, you do whatever you need to do, but it is important that stool moves. It's not important that you have these like 3 logs a day. No, but something is important.
And along those lines, as you're weaning off vegetables and fruit, that's a lot less liquids that you're not taking in anymore. She wants to know how much daily water would be a target.
A huge issue. And for that, I would watch my Tim Noakes interview, because he's done all of these double-blind studies on hydration and an issue of encephalitis of the brain, where the brain gets swollen. You know, when you see an athlete drop dead, especially a marathon runner, it's quite common now for this to happen. It happens from overhydration. We have an issue of overhydration, not under. We don't have any cases of people dying from dehydration. We have cases of overhydration. And this only happened once Gatorade came out to the athletic community. Before that, people would self-regulate. So when I go with the tribes, like when I'm with the Hudsa, they'll run for 18 miles in the mountains, in the midday heat. I can't keep up with them, and they don't drink an ounce of water. They're not thirsty, and they're fine. They're regulating their water appropriately. We do not regulate our water appropriately. Now, there are many reasons for that. The more stressed we are, the more we're going to dehydrate. And we do a lot of things that are stressful, even that we don't even perceive as stressful. Like if we get in the car, our cortisol levels can go up 1,000% as we drive. So there's a lot of things. Cortisol is the stress hormone that can cause dehydration for us. Okay, so it's not just as simple as I'm making it out to be. And I want to be really clear as that. But you drink to thirst. Okay, so if you're not thirsty, I wouldn't force it. And I would say that the hydration industry is as upside down as the dietary industry.
That's strong. That's strong. All right, let's go visit some of the projects that you're doing. First, can you remind the people how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about some of your projects, or if they want to? Are you still doing personal counseling? Are you accepting new patients?
Not at the moment, and not for the last year or more. Let me send you an updated bio. Okay. Yeah, I just sent it to you. Okay. No, not at the moment. I'm really working on a few projects. I work for a lot of film crews now, getting films, documentaries into tribal lands where I've developed a lot of relationships. So I do a lot of that, and I'm really hyper focusing on neuromuscular conditions, because the condition that disabled me used to be very, very rare. And after COVID, we now have 70 to 80 million people with it. And that I just couldn't sit by and watch. So I took a huge financial hit, took a massive break from all of my practices to put together programs for those conditions and get that knowledge out, get studies done on them so that people will see it in the medical literature that this works. And so I've been working really like a dog to get those out. But once I'm done with that, then I will take clients again and get back into it. But right now I'm just seeing those folks. And for the next 2 months, I'll be doing all tribal studies and traveling.
So altruistic. I think, what happened to you and some of the revelations that you had, and, the huge movement, not just physically, but intellectually and spiritually and emotional that you went through. Did you have and I know I'm all over the place with this, but it's just like these things pop into my mind. Did you have some sort of inclination once you had these revelations that along with the release and not needing anything, that you realized you wanted to make a really big contribution to the planet? And once you kind of got out of your local reality?
No, but I did make a lot of promises, if I ever did. I definitely made a lot of promises in terms of what I would do if I was able to heal. And once I healed, that's when I got more of a drive, because you don't know you're going to heal until you do. You know, a lot of it's counterintuitive, like I said. So no, I didn't go in with this idea that I would be able to help other people at all. I really got the idea that no one can help themselves but themselves. That was a bigger lesson for me. But once I healed, then I really felt it was my responsibility and also my desire to get this out to as many people as possible, because I lived on stories of people reversing impossible things. You know, no one had the condition that I had and wrote about it or lived through it, but I would read books on people that had reversed cancer and had reversed heart disease and had reversed depression, and get hope from those situations, especially the people who had been paralyzed and told they would never walk again. I would read those, or people that had reversed thyroid disease. So I kept this idea in my head. And one of the things I've really worked on years is a catalog of people who video themselves when they get better, their story. Because I think if we don't hear these stories, if we only have the dialogue of the fear and the impossibleness of a diagnosis, and that we have no options and that there's no way out, of course that's all we're going to see, right? But the more people that share their stories that get better, then the more it becomes dialogue and the more normal it becomes. And I think that's incredibly important for those who are dealing with an illness at present.
For the people who are concerned about the boredom factor, you know, coming down to 3 or 4 essential foods all day long. I know you had done chicken soup for,
Yeah.
for like 2 or 3 years, like
Right?
psychologically, man, like, no, I don't want any more chicken soup, anything but chicken soup. How do you deal with the monotony of making these adaptations? So the monotony and, yeah, that's a good place to start. How do you deal with that?
It's perspective. You can't have conflicting wants and get anything. It doesn't matter if your goals are financial or health. If you have conflicting wants, you won't get there. So you have to look at where your wants are conflicting. Do you want variety or do you want remission? Real simple. It makes it a lot easier. If you think about that, the body has to work harder the more foods you eat. It has to produce more enzymes. It has to have more energy. If you think about the fact that if you keep it very simple, it's easier for you as well, right? We get decision fatigue. It depletes our dopamine through the right, just dumps our dopamine, every decision we make. So the less decisions, the better. When I go to these tribal lands, either, let's say they eat plants 2 seasons of the year, as some do, during those seasons, it's so boring. Each season is boring. They eat the same thing every day for the whole season, and then they switch. No one in history ever ate different foods every single day, all the time, like we are now. This is a new experiment that we are doing, right? So it was the exact same meal. I mean, when I take film crews, they are bored out of their minds of the food when they're eating with the tribes, bored by day 2. Right? So this variety that we have, this idea that food is entertainment, that has to shift. You have to want something so much that you don't care what you give up. And really, I think it really helps to have a why. So mine was getting rid of that breathing machine, right? It has to be a prime why. It has to be something you actually care about. You know, so often when we do something like a gratitude journal, or we put together a why, we're like for other people, or a gratitude journal is, I'm so grateful for my partner, and these kind of things. But we need the emotion. You need a why that gives you the emotion. For me, I didn't want that breathing machine. I didn't want to be disabled on the streets, right? I didn't want to have $5,000 of prescription medication with insurance every month. That's crippling, right? So you have to have a strong why. And then I think it really helps to have the shadow archetypes and a good knowledge of those, so that you can spot them when you have them. The idea of food as entertainment, that's your child, right? The inner child. Give it something else to do. Give it a hula hoop, you know, go roller skating, find other ways of reward that aren't food-based.
God, that's powerful. That's powerful. There are teachers on the planet. You're one of them, man. You're one of them.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, that's good stuff. food is entertainment. I just think that's like so inherent in where I am. It's all
Yes.
about the dinner. It's all about going out with friends, for dinner. And hey, what are you having? Oh, look at what he's having. Oh, look what she's having. It's just this whole thing, it's a whole
Especially
space.
in America, even more so in America than in other places. With America, we associate the movies with popcorn, right? We have a food for every holiday and everything, and that's actually not normal around the world. Even in modern day society, like here, the Greeks think it's adorable that we always get popcorn at the movies. They're like, really? That's a real thing. That's not just in the movies. And I'm like, yes, yes, that is like a thing. That's a thing. And they think it's so cute that we have foods that go along with every activity. And we do, even soccer practice, there's always the same
Yeah.
snack.
Oh, Gatorade. That's Gatorade. Yeah.
Yes. And yes.
Juice
So
box, juicy boxes. Yeah.
my conditions for that, more so in America than other places. But just so that I think it really helps to understand history and what healthy humans eat and what they ate. And you can see living history right now when you go to the tribal lands, and I haven't been to a single place that has desserts. Not one. Can you imagine never having dessert? But for them, they don't even think about it. And they're not missing anything. They're utterly satisfied. In fact, they have more joy than we will ever feel, and more satisfaction. They don't have insomnia or anxiety or depression, and I can guarantee they're not sad that they can't like Netflix and chill. So so a lot of the things that we do to escape really keep us in our prisons. And I think in being willing to drop anything for a singular goal, you have to have a singular goal. You can't have multiple. Being willing to drop anything, even if that's eating your least favorite food in the whole world, to get better. If you could have nothing else, you have to have that much drive, usually, to get through the tough part.
Let's talk about Captain Soup, because
Okay.
I really want to have a place to send people who are motivated by this talk today, who are inspired and want some actionable items.
Yes.
And also the support of being in a group with other people cannot be overstated.
Yes.
My heart goes out to the situation you were in, where you felt so isolated when you're in your house, and you said that was the hardest part, even worse than the pain, that sense of isolation. So with Captain Soup, first, it'll be fun for you to tell us all about Captain Soup. But secondly, I'm hoping that there's an infrastructure in place, because, now I'm thinking, man, I want to go to one of these places you're talking about, and I want to detox. I want to meditate with the tribe. Although they may look at me like, oh, silly American, like the whole thing is a meditation. You don't need to go sit somewhere. You don't need to go sit somewhere. Come with us hunting, and you'll be meditating, brother. You'll be meditating.
Yeah, they're present all the time. No, you can do captainsoup.com. My soup recipes are there. We've got protocols there. Enableyourhealing.com. That was my private practice, but I still have links to my nervous system groups and things like that. And as I put together other programs, like I really want to do a big one on fertility. That's what I'm motivated to do next. So whenever I do a big program, like I did the Back to Joy back in the day, now I'm doing I call it the Rebels program, because you have to be a rebel to heal. So this is for the nervous disorders.
Interesting.
Exactly. So this is for the MS, the Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all of these conditions. So I work with those, and I have a group starting soon. And then I have, and that's at enableyourhealing.com. And then if you want to keep up with my podcast, because that's where I do the educational pieces and also my keynote speeches, I give a lot of those. I always post those on Instagram. I'm not very active on Instagram like other people, because I'm often in no Wi-Fi zones with my tribal studies. But whenever I have a podcast or anything like that, I'll always post it on Instagram. And there I'm Queen of Heart. So Mary Ruddick, Queen of Hearts. You can find me there.
In all of these websites that you've referenced, there'll be hyperlinks in the show notes, so people can just scroll down. If you're watching us on YouTube, just scroll down. And if not, there'll also be hyperlinks on any of the podcast platforms that you may or may not be listening to us on. There'll be hyperlinks. Tell us real quickly about the Captain Soup story, because that's another inspirational one, where this gentleman who had served nobly in the military for the United States had gotten really sick, and he healed himself through very simple foods, right? Like what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
Brian Gaudette. Do you know, it was phenomenal when I met him because I had never met anyone else who just ate soups to heal. The version of the GAPS diet that I did is not the normal version. So I didn't know anyone else who just stuck on soups all that time. But he did it for a similar reason. And that was that it was simple. I had no energy. I couldn't stand up without having a seizure. So I would make one big pot of soup while sitting down, and then I would eat off of that for the week. And I did it out of a need. I didn't have the energy to cook. And so, and he did it because he couldn't cook. He was doing all these military missions. And so he could ship his soup in. And that's what he did. He could make one big batch of soup, and then he wasn't cooking every day, and it was nourishing and good. And he could do the right macros. Same for me. I couldn't do, complicated math at the time. My brain was very, very ill. So I kept it very simple. I could see exactly how much protein and carbs and fat I was having. So everything was done for me, right? And anyway, so here I am in private practice in Eugene, Oregon, and had been for years. And one of my favorite clients, she's like, "Oh, you've got to meet this guy. He's been making me soup." And I'm like, "Who's this guy?" And she's like, "Oh, he goes by the name Captain Soup. His name is Brian Gaudette." And I was like, "What do you mean he only eats soup?" And she told me a story. And I was like, "Are you serious?" So what happened to Brian was that he's a helicopter pilot, an Apache pilot, and he got thyroid disease, and it was so severe that they were going to ground him. They weren't going to let him fly, and that then would put him out of a career. I mean, it's a huge deal, right? It would kick him out of the military, all these kinds of things. He was very overweight. He made these soups. He dropped all the weight. His thyroid regulated, and he was able to continue his phenomenal career. And then he went to school to do a master's, and he started this soup company. And it just happened to be in my hometown, like where I was at the time.
What?
It was amazing. Yeah. And so she was like, "You guys have to meet." So we met, and we just hit it off immediately. And we've been friends and colleagues ever since. Yeah, I have so much admiration for him. I just think he and his entire family are so incredible.
Oh, what a story. That's captainsoup.com.
That's right.
People go
CaptainSoup.com.
and find out
It's a
more.
wonderful resource. Yes. Because he has a whole team. So they put together a lot of educational programs and ways that you can learn more.
Before we go, Mary, there's one quick one that just came to my mind. Are you okay with the other types of foods if they're unlocked, i.e. fermentation, and sprouting, and any ways of, knocking off the seeds and the nuts and the vegetables' defense mechanisms?
Yes, absolutely. But only once someone is better. So we do this when someone is healthy. If they have starch, right? So for instance, like the nixtamalized corn, I would absolutely allow that for someone in remission. Absolutely. But not for someone trying to get into remission.
So you just have to, you've got to pay the price. Like you said, your why has got to be bigger than all considerations. And it's so important to have that strong mentality, the ability to focus on the end goal, visualize what your life's going to look like healthy.
Yes. You have to pull the arrow back, right? When you're on one of these protocols, it's like putting a cast on. And, when you put a cast on a broken bone, it's utterly uncomfortable. It's itchy, but it's necessary. And then you get to work out once the cast is off. Same thing with these diets. You're that arrow being pulled back. You're going to really tighten things. You're going to do things that you wouldn't normally restrict, right? You wouldn't normally be so tight about. But when you do that, you get ultimate freedom. If you just take gluten out of someone's diet, it does nothing. Does nothing. Even if they feel better, it doesn't shift their microbiome. They always have to be careful about that going forward. You actually fix your microbiome, you fix your immunity, you fix your nervous system in the gut lining, you can go back to eating all the foods. You get ultimate freedom. Your arrow just, right? I'm going to Italy. I'm going to eat some pizza. I'm going to have some pasta. I'm going to be just fine.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And that is because I did those soups for years.
Yeah.
Don't pay the price. If you think of it that way, it's paying a price. I think of it more as like a season. There's a season for everything, right? And there's a winter when things are plain and simple and maybe not so pleasant, but you have to go through the winter to get to the summer. Okay.
I really want there to be a fellowship group for people who are adapting, so people can share their trials and tribulations, and they can share their you know, how hard it was, so people don't feel alone when they're trying to adapt, because most of us are all in our little silos. You know, we're all in our neighborhood. There's no one in my neighborhood who's keto adapting.
No, and they won't understand and they won't like you. You know, nobody wants to hear about diet because they'll feel judged for not doing something with their diet. You just don't get good reactions about talking about it. So yes, that is true. I've really tried to build that in. So like the Rebels program that I have, the nervous system program, it has a whole community aspect. In fact, I do groups on purpose rather than one-on-one. I prefer one-on-one. It's easier for me as a practitioner, but the groups, everyone learns from each other and they make friends and they have people rooting for them. And they make very deep friendships, you know, in those groups. So I do think the communal aspect is very, very important. And it is something that I've been very conscientious to build in. We have, like in this program, and it'll change because I'm constantly doing new things. So, you know, for you listeners, like don't like go and expect to find this. There could be something else, but because I am always refining. But right now we meet with them 4 times a week. So I have a nutritionist with them once a week. Then I have an accountability coach. I have a lifestyle coach to make sure that they're getting the meditation, they're doing the gratitude, they're doing the exercise, like whatever it is, right? That they're getting the ketone levels, that their glucose is appropriate. If not, they tweak it. And then I have a friend group where they just are social. That's it. They can talk to people that understand their life. They can be utterly authentic. They don't have to hide the illness or overplay it. They can just be exactly who they are with people that totally get it. And I do think that's very, very important.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You get strength in numbers and strength in synergy, strength in fellowship. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy, but the why is bigger. For me, the why is bigger. I need to make this adaptation, you know. I need to make the
Listen, I
adaptation.
understand. I mean, that soup diet that I did, it's easier for other people. For me, it was hard. I am someone who, I'm an Epicurean by nature. So like, I like fun things. If you give me a roller coaster, you're my new favorite person. You know, if I can swim with dolphins, that's great. And if there is fun food at that event, I am all over it. So it was very hard for me. It's not my personality to be a Puritan or to be strict or regimented or plain with food. I mean, I had worked as a professional baker. I loved to make art out of food. so that was a very difficult thing for me. But so I really understand if people don't do these things, because it took me getting extremely ill to be willing to give up that part of my life. So I think it's very understandable, you know? And I don't know if I would have made these massive changes if I hadn't gotten to that level of illness, you know? Because I do remember a phase, maybe 5 years into the illness, when I tried a low carb diet just because people were doing it. I think I made it 2 days. So
That's me.
And I'm known as a disciplined person, you know, like I was an athlete and all these things, but I didn't know the why behind it. So you want to understand the microbiome, you want to understand the nervous system, you want to understand the immune system, and you want to understand why you care. And if you have that why, then it's never an issue.
And we'll be able to put our weight back on. I love what you said about the cast. You're putting the cast on so that you can work out again.
Yes.
You know, that's why you're putting the cast on. That's why you're getting itchy, so that you can work out again. Because that's like a psychological thing for me, is my workouts. That's one of the reasons I get weak and carb up, because I know that the next day I'm going to be nice and loaded. You know, the liver's going to be loaded.
That's like an alcoholic. That's like an alcoholic having a drink in the morning. It is. It doesn't make you feel better? Absolutely. Is it a good idea? No.
Called out, and rightfully
But
so.
it actually is, because when you're in that in-between zone with no energy, genuine mitochondrial energy being produced, or at least not enough, you have a carbohydrate. It could be an orange or a bowl of cereal. It doesn't matter. You feel amazing. You can bike up the rapid speed.
Amazing.
Yeah, just like an alcoholic does when he has that drink.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
You
I
can go to
need
work.
it framed that way, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, because it's so counterintuitive. The carb makes you feel great. It's like, how come they keep telling me that this is giving me fatty liver disease? How come they keep telling me it's messing up my kidneys and this is why I have the brain fog when I feel so good when I eat it? Why is this the brain fog? You know?
Let me address those quickly because those come up a lot, and then I'll need to go to my meeting, unfortunately. I'd love
Oh
to
yeah.
talk.
Thank you. First, thank you so much for all your time. Oh my gosh.
You're so welcome. Fatty liver disease comes from fructose. That's the sugar found in fruit and honey, but also in corn and a number of other foods. Now, if we eat an overabundance of it, we can have some. But if we have an overabundance of it year round, we get fatty liver disease. It doesn't come from protein or from eating fat. You don't eat fat and then get fatty something. That's not how the body works. It's not that simple. But there's a lot of biochemistry in between. But the fatty liver comes from fructose. I want you all to remember that. Now, historically, that was for a real reason, and that was for gaining weight. When you have a fatty liver, you're going to gain weight easily. You're going to get insulin resistance. In the seasons of even 200 years ago, we would want to get fatty liver for a short period, and that would be at the end of fall. That's when most of the fruit is available, actually, if you think about it. When we eat that fruit, we get a bit of fatty liver and we put on a lot of weight. That gets us through the winter. The gorillas do this, the humans do this, we all do. So fatty liver has a place, but it's supposed to be very temporary, and it's done through fructose. Kidney disease does not come from ketosis. I reversed my stage 4 kidney disease with ketosis. It is, there's many different causes and issues that can develop that create a state of kidney disease. There's polycystic, there's autoimmune, there's lots of different forms, there's CKD. But typically the thing that stresses kidneys the most is oxalates and lectins. Lectins, anything water soluble that's a toxin is going to go through the kidneys. So those are your lectins and your oxalates. Oxalates are the most problematic. Those are found in animal products. There was a theory that protein was very bad for the kidneys, but that study was done on stage 4 kidney disease, which is when you need to get a transplant. And literally every food is bad for the kidneys at that point. So it's not protein. And in fact, now the studies say the opposite, that protein has no effect on the kidneys. So it's just not trickled down into the doctor's offices and into the public sphere.
You had said earlier the oxalates found in the animal products. Did you mean to say?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My clients are funneling in.
No, I want to clarify that's not the case.
Thank you. No. The oxalates are found in the non-animal products, is what it is. They're found in plant matters. They're in things like spinach and nuts and seeds and things like that.
Okay. You have clients coming in. You've been more than generous with your time. This has been a really impactful show for me, and I am so grateful for who you are, what you went through, and just your desire to share it. You're saving lives, Mary.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Talk soon. The information, including but not limited to text, graphics, audio, images, and video contained in For the Fighter in You, is for informational purposes only. No material on our show is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.
For our full schedule of fights on the NBC Sports Network, CW and ABC affiliates, visit UnitedFightAlliance.com. United Fight Alliance. United we fight.